The sunlight hit my desk just right, glinting off the silver bracelet my grandmother had pressed into my palm years ago. I smoothed the silk blouse over my shoulders, feeling the tension in my back ease just slightly. My phone buzzed. Another message. Another reminder that some parts of the past never really go away. Happy birthday, Nicole. Are you still planning to vanish this year? I laughed softly, the sound strange even to me. That text was a relic, almost a joke, but it carried the weight of a memory I hadn't allowed to fade. My father's voice still echoed in my head, sharp and commanding. Disappear. Don't come back on your birthday. I had disappeared, and not in the way he thought. Now, 10 years later, I sat in my corner office, looking out over the city I had quietly conquered. My fingers tapped the edge of the sleek mahogany desk. The skyline shimmered like diamonds against a twilight sky, but inside, I felt the pull of old ghosts. The person they had expected, a lost, meek daughter, was long gone. And yet, with that text, the past nudged me awake. I thought of the files stacked in my safe, the small fortune they assumed I'd never touch. A smile tugged at my lips. Today, the disappearing act was about to pay off in ways they'd never imagine. I remember that birthday vividly. I was 17, standing in the center of our grand living room, surrounded by balloons that looked like they belonged in a magazine, and yet feeling invisible. My dad's gaze was icy, like he could see straight through me, or worse, right past me. You need to disappear tonight, he had said, voice low, almost a command.
Go. Leave.
Don't expect anyone to care if you show up. I felt my chest tighten, a knot of hurt and disbelief forming. My hands shook as I gripped the edge of the marble fireplace. For a moment, I considered screaming, crying, begging for some shred of love or acknowledgement, but the words stuck in my throat. There was no arguing with him. Not then, not ever. I turned away and fled to the one place that felt safe, my grandmother's small sunroom at the back of the estate. Sunlight poured through the stained glass, painting colors across the floor. She was sitting there, knitting, as if she had been expecting me. You've got fire in you, Nicole, she said, her voice soft but steady. Don't let them snuff it out. One day, you'll vanish on your own terms, and no one will ever forget you. She pressed a small, leather-bound journal into my hands. Start writing.
Plan. Save.
Believe in your own worth. That's the inheritance that matters more than money. And so I did. That night, I packed a small bag with essentials, slipped out through the servant's side door, and left a note that simply said, I'll be back on my own terms. My heart raced with fear and exhilaration. Every step away from the mansion was a step toward independence, a rebellion against a family that had tried to erase me. The sting of their rejection burned, but it was sharpened into something else, determination. I promised myself that one day, I wouldn't just survive without them. I would thrive. And when I did, I would make sure they recognized the cost of underestimating me. The first few months after I left were terrifying. I had no one to rely on but myself, and the world outside my gilded cage was harsher than I had imagined. I rented a tiny studio apartment in Boston, the kind where the pipes groaned at night and the paint peeled in corners. Yet for the first time in my life, it was mine. I could breathe. I could think. I could plan. The leather-bound journal my grandmother gave me became my constant companion. I mapped out budgets, listed goals, sketched business ideas. Nights blurred into early mornings, filled with coffee, cold pizza, and the quiet hum of determination. My hands ached from typing, but I loved it. Every long hour, every struggle felt like a stitch in the fabric of the life I was building. I met Clara Donovan at a networking event, a seasoned entrepreneur with sharp eyes and a softer heart than most expected. She saw something in me I hadn't fully realized yet. You've got guts, Nicole, she said, sipping her espresso. But guts without strategy won't take you far. Let me help. Under her mentorship, I learned the ropes of the corporate world, pitching clients, negotiating contracts, reading market trends. There were nights I cried into my pillow, overwhelmed by self-doubt, wondering if I was chasing a dream too big for someone like me. But each small victory kept me going. My first freelance client, the first profitable design project, the first check that made me realize I could actually support myself. I kept my progress hidden from my family. My father thought I was struggling in some low-paying job, while I quietly accumulated assets, investments, and contacts that would one day form the backbone of my empire. I learned to celebrate privately, a quiet toast with chamomile tea after landing a major client, a new journal entry marking another milestone. Along the way, I faced prejudice and dismissal from people who assumed a young woman couldn't be competent or ambitious. I learned to navigate their skepticism with calm confidence, letting results speak louder than words. Every challenge honed my resilience. Every slight sharpened my focus. By the time I was 24, I had a thriving consultancy that specialized in strategic investments and acquisitions. My life was unrecognizable from that terrified 17-year-old who had slipped out the side door of her family mansion. And still, the world thought of me as small, invisible, still under my father's shadow. It was delicious, the quiet satisfaction of building power while keeping it hidden. And now, with the anniversary of that fateful birthday approaching, I knew it was time. Time for the family to see not the girl they dismissed, but the woman who had turned rejection into triumph. The day finally arrived. I hadn't been to the family estate in over a decade, and the idea of walking back through those ornate double doors made my stomach flutter, not with fear, but with anticipation. My father and stepmother had sent a text insisting on a birthday dinner. They expected a timid, struggling girl to show up, unsure and apologetic. What they got instead was me, poised, confident, and unstoppable. I stepped into the mansion, heels clicking against the marble floors, a subtle scent of jasmine trailing behind me. The living room hadn't changed much. The same massive chandelier, the same portraits of ancestors who had, like my father, never understood me. But I was different now. Everything about me radiated the life I had built. The custom-tailored suit whispered success. The gold watch hinted at accomplishments they couldn't even guess, and the subtle diamond studs at my ears said I had arrived on my terms. They froze when they saw me. My father's mouth opened, closed, and then opened again like a fish out of water. My stepmother's perfectly arched eyebrows rose in silent surprise. I smiled, letting the silence stretch just a little longer. Let them stew in the tension. Let them wonder what this version of me had been doing all these years. Finally, I spoke. "Hello, Dad. Happy to see you remember it's my birthday." Nicole." His voice cracked, unsteady. You look different." "I am different," I replied, letting the words linger. "Do you know why I disappeared that night 10 years ago?"
Because I was told to.
Disappear. And I did. But I didn't just vanish, I built. I learned. I grew. And now I'm not just back. I'm standing on the foundation I made for myself, without your help, without your approval, and yes, with your inheritance included. I gestured toward the papers on the dining table, legal documents, asset transfers, and accounts they had assumed I'd never access. Their eyes darted across the pages, disbelief flickering into shame and then awe. "You see," I continued, calm and composed, "the money wasn't lost, the opportunity wasn't wasted. I kept it safe. I invested wisely. I didn't just survive, I flourished." The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. My father's face had gone pale, the color drained from his cheeks. My stepmother clutched her pearl necklace, trembling slightly. They had underestimated me for too long. I let them take it all in. The elegance of the mansion's decor I now controlled, the personal touches in the office that screamed meticulous planning, the quiet power that filled every corner of the room. And then I let the final truth land. The assets, the companies, the investments, they were all mine. Fully. And they had no claim without my consent. Their disbelief was almost comical, if it weren't so satisfying. My father's jaw tightened, guilt flashing in his eyes, and my stepmother's fingers drummed nervously on the table. I let the tension hang, knowing this was the moment I had imagined for years. The the moment when the powerless girl they dismissed became the woman who held all the cards. I stood there, letting the weight of the room settle around us. For years, they had assumed control, assumed superiority, assumed I would always be small, invisible, pliable. Not anymore. I have the upper hand now, I said, letting my voice carry calm authority. And with that comes a choice. I can help you, but only if certain conditions are met. Otherwise, the past stays exactly where it belongs, behind me. My father's eyes narrowed. Conditions? He asked, his voice tight. Yes, I replied, folding my hands in front of me. First, Dad, you must acknowledge that your words and actions shaped this path, and that it's your own pride that cost you a relationship with me. That means therapy, self-reflection, and taking tangible steps to become someone who actually listens. He flinched, but I continued. Stepmom, you will stop enabling patterns that hurt others. You will stop pretending everything is perfect when it's not. I want honesty, accountability, and active support, not silent complicity. I could see the shame in their faces, the slight shift from defensiveness to realization. Good. They were listening. There's more, I said, my tone softening but remaining firm. We can rebuild relationships, but it has to be on new terms. Dreams you abandoned for convenience, or toxic habits you allowed to fester, must be addressed. We are not going back to old ways. I will not allow the past to dictate the future. If you want in my life, you must grow, actively, intentionally. I saw my father swallow, the tight line of his lips betraying vulnerability. My stepmother's hands trembled, but not in fear, perhaps in the stirrings of genuine reflection. And, I added, giving them a quiet smile, if you follow these terms, I am willing to share the inheritance, access to the companies, to investments, but only as partners who are willing to work on themselves. This is not about punishment. It's about growth, respect,
Trust.
and proving that you can be worthy of being in my life again. The room was heavy with silence. I could almost feel the power shift solidifying around me. For the first time, I wasn't just Nicole, the daughter they had underestimated. I was Nicole, the architect of my destiny. And now, I was extending a hand, but only to those willing to meet me at my level. I leaned back slightly, letting them absorb the gravity of my words. Compassion and firmness balanced in my voice, like a melody of justice tempered with mercy. It was a mix they had never heard from me before, soft, yet unyielding. The truth was clear. I held the keys, and the choice to step into a better future was theirs. But I had already stepped into mine. And that was the real victory. Weeks passed, and change began to take root. My father started therapy, his old rigidity softening as he confronted years of pride and neglect. He still struggled, but I could see the effort in the way he listened more, the way he asked questions instead of issuing commands. It wasn't perfection, but it was progress. My stepmother began volunteering with local charities, channeling her energies into something meaningful beyond appearances. She admitted, quietly, that she had enabled patterns of silence and avoidance, and for the first time, I sensed genuine remorse rather than performative contrition. I reflected on my own journey, sitting by the floor-to-ceiling window in my office, the city lights flickering below like distant stars. The leather-bound journal my grandmother had given me sat on my desk, worn at the edges, but alive with the blueprint of my independence. Every entry, every plan, every secret triumph, it had led me here. The symbolic advice she had whispered to me all those years ago, disappear on your terms and build your worth, had become a guiding force. I hadn't just disappeared, I had transformed pain into power, rejection into resilience, invisibility into undeniable presence. And now, I could choose connection over resentment. I could allow them into my life, but on new terms, with boundaries that protected my hard-won peace. Watching them slowly embrace accountability, I realized that the real inheritance was never the money. It was the strength I had cultivated, the clarity of my own identity, and the grace of self-respect. I smiled, feeling the familiar warmth in my chest that came from knowing I had navigated the storm and emerged unshaken. Life had taught me lessons no privilege could provide. Pain had taught me wisdom. Distance had taught me strategy. Silence had taught me patience. And courage had taught me victory. Leaning back, I whispered to myself, the words carrying softly but firmly. I disappeared once, and in doing so, I found everything I was meant to be. And nothing, and no one, will ever take that from me again. It was the final line of my own story, one I could narrate to the world, or keep as a private mantra. Either way, it was mine.